The female protagonist settled into her room as the maid bid her a good night and left. She sighed in relief, finally able to rest after the day's events. Her thoughts drifted to the fact that today was the last day she would see that maid, realizing she should say a proper goodbye the next morning. As she grabbed a teacup and took a sip, the hot liquid startled her. She gasped, thinking how Eric would have scolded her for not behaving like a lady if he had seen her. But she dismissed the thought, focusing on the significance of the next day. Tomorrow she was to become a bride, and the days of enduring her three brothers were finally over. Her mind wandered back to her heart-wrenching past, recalling how her story began 20 years ago when she was taken in by the Ernst family at the age of 7. After the family's only daughter, Alina Ernst, had died, the Duke and Duchess found her, an orphan girl who bore a striking resemblance to their late daughter. She remembered the Duchess gently holding her hand, asking if she would like to come with them. That was how she became part of the Ernst family. However, the Duke and Duchess, the only two who cared for her, passed away just a year after she was brought into the house, marking the beginning of her hardships. Harley reflected on the years she spent struggling to survive in a household where the three Ernst brothers harassed and tormented her in every way possible. Eugene, the eldest, Cavell, the second, and Erich, the youngest. Her childhood was far from happy, and the memory of it filled her with annoyance, causing her to slam her cup on the table. Just yesterday, Cavell and Erich had made a fuss about her leaving the house, while Eugene had watched from outside the door as she tried on her wedding dress for the last time. She hadn't seen him since, confirming her suspicion that he still didn't like her. However, despite the challenges of those 20 years, Harley realized they hadn't been entirely in vain. The Ernst brothers had grown to like her in their own ways, though she was certain they'd deny it if she ever mentioned it. Still, she had reached the end of her patience with living in their household. At 27, she was getting married quite late, considering most women in Arlanta wed in their early 22s. Not being an official member of the Ernst family had made it difficult to find a suitable husband early on. Yet, it was thanks to Eugene, who inherited the Duke's title at a young age and proved to be a competent leader, that she finally found the perfect marriage candidate. Harley considered the man she was set to marry the next day. He was a decent man, even without his family's status. Since she had no father, Eugene was originally supposed to walk her down the aisle, but for some reason, it had been decided that Cavell would escort her instead. Tomorrow, she thought with excitement as she suddenly sprang up, she would finally be free from the confines of the house she had grown to despise. She stepped to her bed and flopped down, lying upside down, feeling a sense of liberation wash over her. It was time to bid farewell to this room as well. She felt certain that she would have a good dream that night, and with that thought she drifted off to sleep. However, when she awoke, she felt an unusual chill that made her wonder what was happening. Confusion set in as she realized she was no longer in her warm bed but outside in the snow, her younger self shivering in the cold. Beside her, Eugene, also appearing much younger, was shaking her urgently, his voice filled with panic as he tried to wake her. Harley couldn't comprehend the situation. She questioned where she was, what this place could be, and why she was no longer in her room. Nervously, she thought it must be a dream. Eugene continued to yell her name, demanding to know if she wanted to die out in the cold. His frantic voice only added to her confusion. She wondered aloud when Eugene had become so young, even asking if he was Eugene's son. His sharp response, questioning if she had lost her mind, and berating her for not hiding in the stables if she knew Eric was going to pull a prank, left Harley even more bewildered. Nothing made sense. Why did Eugene look like a child? And why was he talking about Eric pulling a prank on her? Something was definitely wrong. But before she could make sense of it, Eugene declared that he would take her back inside. As Eugene tried to lift Harley, he gently placed his hand on her cheek. Harley closed her eyes, whispering softly that he was warm. Eugene flinched at her words, hearing her weak voice as she told him that she was cold. Then, without warning, she fainted in his arms. He shouted her name in panic. Harley's mind drifted back to the past, recalling the first time she met the three Ernst brothers. It was late spring, a year after her birth mother's death. In her naive innocence, she had mistaken them for the angels of the Ernst family. The memory of that day replayed vividly in her mind. The Duke and Duchess had returned home, calling out to their boys with excitement. The brothers had eagerly run to greet their parents, with Eugene mentioning that they would have waited downstairs had they known their parents were coming. The Duchess, wanting to surprise them, revealed Harley to the boys, telling them to say hello, but instead of welcoming her, the boys were less than pleased. They remarked on her appearance, with one of them bluntly stating that she looked like a beggar. The Duchess, displeased by the remark, especially from Cavell, reprimanded him sharply. Cavell tried to justify himself, saying she looked pretty thin. Meanwhile, Eric, holding his dog Penny, whispered to the pet that Harley wasn't food, but rather something dirty. The harshness of their words and actions made Harley's spirit droop. The Duchess announced that Harley would be living with them from now on, introducing each of her sons to Harley, Eugene, Cavell, and Erich. At that moment, Harley, who had once seen the boys as pure and innocent, suddenly felt as though they had transformed into little devils. The Duchess continued, hoping they would all get along well and treat each other kindly. But for Harley, that marked the beginning of a disastrous war. As Harley slowly began to regain consciousness, she heard Cavell and Eugene in a panic. Cavell nervously questioned if she was dead, while Eugene told him to watch what he was saying. Harley, still groggy, wondered who was making so much noise near her. Cavell then frantically noted that she looked like a snowman, questioning if she was even alive and breathing. He panicked further when he felt her freezing hands and began to slap her in desperation, yelling for her to wake up and not die. Eugene, maintaining his composure, told Cavell to stop and instructed him to get the butler to call a doctor. He also told him to find a maid to bring a thick blanket and warm water. Cavell hurried off to carry out the instructions. Eugene then called for Erich, who was hiding in fear, to stop cowering and come add more logs to the fireplace. Erich dashed off to obey. Turning back to Harley, Eugene asked if she was awake, but as she tried to open her eyes, she quickly shut them again, overwhelmed by the situation. Eugene, desperate to keep her conscious, slapped her lightly and pleaded for her to wake up. In her mind, Harley could only think how tired she was of the slapping, wondering if he was doing it on purpose. It hurt, and she wished he would stop. Eugene reassured Harley that the doctor would arrive soon and warned her that she might have frostbite. He instructed her to stay by the fire, as her hands and feet were still frozen. Trembling, Harley muttered that she was cold. Eugene noticed something nearby, picked it up and placed it on her. Surprised, Harley demanded to know what he was doing, only to hear him explain that the fleece would keep her warm. She found herself fully covered, with only her head peeking out, and wriggled uncomfortably, realizing she couldn't move at all. Eugene, growing impatient, shouted for Cavell and Erich, frustrated by how long they were taking. Erich, trembling with guilt, stammered, wondering if it was all his fault. Harley, still disoriented, suddenly remembered the situation, recognizing it as something that had happened half a year after the Duke and Duchess had brought her into their home. Eugene sighed as he spoke to Erich, reminding him that they couldn't keep this incident hidden from their parents. He made it clear that this time Erich had gone too far. Harley reflected on the fact that Erich, who was Alina's twin, had always hated her the most out of the three brothers. She realized that this was just another attempt by Erich to harass her, and it was also the first time she had nearly died since coming to live in the Ernst household. Eugene observed that Cavell had gotten sidetracked and instructed Erich to find him and check on what the servants were doing. Meanwhile, Harley, unable to move and still shivering, noted with some disbelief how even the usually evil Erich was trembling. She wished she could watch the commotion but was too immobilized to do anything except wriggle. Suddenly the Duchess arrived and, upon seeing Harley's condition, screamed in shock. Eugene called out to his mother, and the Duchess rushed to Harley, holding her close. Her concern was evident as she spoke soothingly to Harley, reassuring her that everything would be fine and asking if she was all right. Turning to the boys, she demanded to know what they had done while she and the Duke were away. Harley, stunned, could hardly believe that the Duchess was here and was witnessing the scene. The Duke announced that the doctor was on his way, crossing the Winston Bridge. The Duchess, worried about the delay, asked Sarah and Marie what was taking them so long. Determined to find them herself, she asked the Duke if he could carry Harley to her bed. As the Duchess left, the Duke lifted Harley and turned to Eugene, asking where Cavell and Erich were. Eugene, nervously, explained that he had sent them to find the butler and the maids. The Duke, sternly, told Eugene they would discuss it later and trusted him to tell the truth. Eugene apologized. The Duke reassured Harley that her bed would be more comfortable than the floor. As he carried her, Harley timidly addressed him, expressing her frustration. She told the Duke that he had put her in a difficult situation before fainting again. The Duke, alarmed, called her name, but Harley remained unconscious. In her semi-conscious state, Harley pondered the strange situation. It had been 2 weeks since she first woke up from that snowy day, and she still hadn't awoken from what felt like a dream. Reflecting on the incident, she concluded it was ruled an accident while she was fleeing one of Erich's pranks. She suspected Eugene had covered for his younger brother. Despite the circumstances, Harley felt a sense of resignation, knowing she had faced similar situations before. The Duchess, exhausted from nursing her back to health, had done all she could. The Duke, holding a bowl of food, urged Harley to eat, but she insisted she wasn't hungry. He countered that she needed to eat while she was ill. Despite being a caring husband and father, The Duke's disciplinary methods with his sons were known to be strict. He gently encouraged her to take just one more bite. Harley reluctantly ate, but then blurted out her concern that eating the day before her wedding could cause the dress not to fit properly. The Duke, with a hint of humor, suggested that if she wanted to play bride, they had 3 boys who could stand in as grooms, allowing her to choose any of them. Harley was furious. She turned her face away and sobbed, lamenting that there was just one day left before she would be free from the house, only to find herself trapped in what she felt was a stupid dream on that very day. In her frustration, she screamed out her hatred, causing the Duke to look on in confusion. He hesitated before deciding that she must be tired and left the room to give her some rest. Harley was overwhelmed with frustration, wondering why the dream felt so real and pleading for her wedding and freedom to return. She slapped herself, feeling the pain and realizing it was like she had really returned to her childhood. Suddenly she heard Erich enter the room, questioning why she hadn't told their parents the truth. Harley thought to herself that she didn't remember everything clearly. When she had woken up in the snowstorm, she hadn't known it was Erich's doing, and her memories of childhood were foggy. Erich, shouting angrily, accused her of thinking she had won and declared he never asked for her help. Harley, finding him bothersome, plopped down on her bed and told him to leave if he was finished talking. She sighed, reflecting on how much she loved her wedding dress and the effort she had put into having it made by the famous Queen Arabella boutique. Seeing her in such a state made Erich uneasy. As Harley, frustrated, slapped herself again in an attempt to wake up, Erich, confused and shocked, fled the room calling out for his father. The room was silent as Harley wrapped herself in a blanket, silently praying to return to the day of her wedding when she next opened her eyes. Despite her pleas, her prayers seemed to be in vain. Sitting on the floor, still covered in blankets, Harley felt Eugene's presence. He questioned her sanity, to which she admitted she might have lost her mind. Eugene expressed his irritation, saying no one would pay any attention to her anyway. Harley wondered why he had gone through so much trouble to help her if he felt that way. She thought it would have been better if he had just left her in the snow, which might have allowed her to return to her time. Eugene clarified that he hadn't helped her to save her, but simply because he didn't want to see someone die on Ernst's territory. Harley reflected on how Ernst and his family seemed to be the only things that mattered to Eugene. She then waddled closer to the fire for warmth. Harley looked at Eugene, who questioned her desire to live after she had seemed ready to give up. Observing Eugene's reaction, she noted that it had been some time since she had seen him respond in such a way. Eugene had become dull and uninteresting after the death of the Duke and Duchess, and despite her resemblance to Alina with her silver hair, she could never truly be her. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten all day. She asked Eugene to get her some food, but he was annoyed by her demand. To persuade him, she feigned weakness, complaining about feeling faint and dizzy. Eugene flinched at her display, and she put on a pitiable face, emphasizing her hunger since she hadn't eaten since morning. Later, Eugene brought her some food. As Harley blew on it to cool it down and took a sip, she screamed out because it was too hot. She then made a teary face to get him to bring her water, but Eugene firmly told her to be quiet. Harley wondered if the amount of food was insufficient but decided not to ask for more, knowing Eugene's glare would discourage her. After eating, Harley slid the bowl away and lay on the floor, deciding to wait until dinner time. She gazed at the chandelier, wishing to return to being 27, and lamenting how close she had been to gaining her freedom, her wedding, and her dress. At that moment, the door burst open, and Cavell entered excitedly, noticing her lying there and assuming she was asleep. Harley recognized Cavell's voice and pretended to sleep, hoping not to be disturbed. Eugene scolded Cavell for not knocking, but Cavell dismissed this, continuing to shake Harley awake and suggesting they play tag. Internally, Harley was frustrated by the disturbance and wished Cavell would stop shaking her. Eugene suggested Cavell go read a book or play with Erich instead, as it would be better for him to interact with people of their level. Harley was exasperated by their behavior, finding their actions frustrating. Cavell was renowned as a child genius in swordsmanship, possessing stamina akin to a monster. This made playing with him extremely exhausting for Harley. Now, despite her being unwell, Cavell insisted on playing with her, while Eugene implied that Harley was inferior to them. Cavell, ignoring Eugene's suggestion to play with Erich, continued to shake Harley and insist that she wake up. Frustrated by his persistence and the physical shaking, Harley shouted that she was awake. Cavell, excited, asked what they should play, but Harley, overwhelmed, grabbed him and vomited on him. Eugene, shocked by the turn of events, exclaimed Cavell's name as Cavell reacted with disgust, noting that he had brought this upon himself. Eugene was speaking with the Duchess, reassuring her that Harley was improving and that she had only eaten some light soup. He assured her that he was taking good care of Harley and that he would stay with her, mentioning that she was currently sleeping. Harley, overhearing this conversation, was frustrated and called Eugene a liar. Knowing that he had seen her wake up, she noted the stark difference in Eugene's tone when speaking to her versus when speaking to his parents. Meanwhile, Cavell peeked through the door, appearing scared, and ran to Eugene, crying. Eugene scolded Cavell for not heeding his advice to play with Eric, instructing him to return to his room to avoid being scolded by their parents. He assured Cavell that he could play with Harley in a few days once she was better. Harley observed that Eugene, despite being a kind and gentle older brother to his siblings, seemed to harbor resentment towards her. She heard Eugene question whether they hated her that much, something he had wanted to ask for the past 20 years. Eugene's response confirmed that they did not like her, as she was not Alina. Harley responded, expressing her own dislike for them and her deep frustration. She wanted to go back to her previous life and forget about them all, wishing it would be as if they had never met. When the Duke and Duchess arrived, Eugene greeted them, and the Duchess immediately rushed to Harley, concerned about her fever and bringing her favorite potato soup. Eugene, Cavell, and Eric were displeased by their mother's evident care for Harley. The Duchess encouraged Harley to eat, and Harley complied, praising the soup as delicious. The Duchess was shocked and emotional when Harley referred to her as Auntie, causing her to drop her spoon. The Duchess's emotional response brought happiness to the Duke, while the boys were left in shock. Harley asked the Duke for some water, addressing him as Uncle. The Duke was taken aback and emotional at the term. Both the Duke and Duchess hugged Harley tightly, overwhelmed with affection. Although Harley had never used such terms with them before, she felt that things were different now. Eugene, Cavell, and Erich were displeased by the display of affection. Harley resolved to take full advantage of the situation, embracing the chance to do whatever she wished while she remained trapped in the dream. Harley was trying on a new dress, and the Duchess couldn't help but express her delight, showering her with compliments and clapping in approval. Harley admired herself in the mirror, genuinely feeling that the dresses were beautiful. When she voiced her approval, the Duchess enthusiastically decided to buy all the dresses, piling them up with joy. While the Duchess was busy speaking with the shop owner, the Duke approached Harley, expressing how her presence had brought such happiness to Melissa, the Duchess, and how that in turn made him happy as well. Touched by his words, the Duke offered to get anything Harley wanted, like a doting father. However, their moment was interrupted by Cavell, who angrily shouted that Harley wasn't pretty at all, accusing her of trying to replace Alina. Harley had anticipated this reaction ever since she started calling their parents Auntie and Uncle. Taking advantage of the situation, Harley approached the Duke with a teary, cute face, downplaying Cavell's outburst by agreeing with him and asking the Duke not to be mad, claiming what Cavell said was true. Though she felt a twinge of guilt for manipulating the situation, she brushed it off, reminding herself that this was her dream, and she could do as she pleased. The Duke, caught in Harley's manipulative charm, immediately assured her that what Cavell said wasn't true at all. He then turned to Cavell, scolding him sternly and dragging him away, despite Cavell's protests that the Duke was his dad and it was his family, not Harley's. Harley found Cavell's reaction childish, but felt no sympathy, recalling everything he had done to her in the past. Deciding to return to her room, she started walking away. On her way, Erich tripped her, causing her to fall. His frustration boiled over as he expressed his annoyance, telling her to leave. Harley, equally angry, shot back, saying they wouldn't have to see each other if he just left her alone. The two glared at each other, trading insults. Erich called her ugly, and she retorted by calling him stupid. Before the situation could escalate further, the Duchess arrived, asking what was going on. Harley was about to complain about Erich, but Eugene quickly intervened, claiming that Harley had simply tripped. He offered his hand to help her up, with a facade of kindness. Harley, recognizing his act, smiled and thanked him, knowing she could play along just as well. Eugene froze at her smile, momentarily caught off guard. Confused by his reaction, Harley extended her hand to accept his help, but to her shock, Eugene suddenly slapped her hand away, causing her to fall again. Stunned, Harley lay there, bewildered by what had just happened. Eugene coldly remarked that Harley should have held onto his hand more tightly, implying that her fall was her own fault. He then suggested to the Duchess that they should feed Harley something more nutritious, pointing out that she was too weak. Harley was stunned by his insinuation, internally scoffing at the idea that her fall was somehow her fault. The Duchess, concerned, agreed with Eugene and proposed getting Harley some health supplements. Eugene supported the idea, though Harley could see through his pretense, knowing he didn't actually care for her. She realized he was likely trying to make her life miserable with the prospect of taking medicine, but she saw it as an opportunity to improve her health. The Duchess, excited by the thought of helping Harley, suggested a family outing when the weather got warmer. Envisioning all of them going together, Harley was horrified by the idea, feeling a chill run down her spine as she glanced nervously at Eugene and Eric, who were glaring at her with clear resentment. She tried to dismiss the idea, but the Duchess remained enthusiastic, leaving the room with hopeful plans. After she left, Eugene turned to Harley with a stern expression, accusing her of having a talent for tricking people. He made it clear that whatever she did to fool their parents wouldn't work on him and his siblings, reminding her that, despite their parents' kindness, they would never accept her as part of their family. As Eugene walked away, Erich, before leaving, expressed his deep resentment, wishing she were gone forever. Harley was left feeling the weight of their hostility, knowing that no matter how much the Duke and Duchess treated her kindly, she would never be accepted by their children. Harley stood alone in the silent hallway, reflecting on how the behavior of the children, though bothersome now, was almost endearing compared to the harsh bullying they would inflict on her when they were older. As she reached her room, she sighed, noticing her bruised knees and feeling a wave of frustration. The childish pink room she was in grated on her nerves, but she couldn't bring herself to complain to the Duke and Duchess. Knowing how much effort they had put into decorating it for her, she plopped down on the bed, her thoughts drifting to Alina Ernst, the beloved girl whose life had been tragically short. Harley lamented that, while some people couldn't bear the void Alina had left and forced her to fill it, others couldn't forgive her for stepping into that role. She believed she might have been able to endure it all if she hadn't had to start over from the beginning. Sadness overwhelmed her as tears welled up in her eyes, and she began to sob uncontrollably. Turning over on the bed, she cried out loudly, feeling the hopelessness of her situation and wishing desperately to wake up from the nightmare she found herself trapped in. Everything felt utterly hopeless to her. Eric was playing with his dog, Penny, when he suddenly commanded, "Penny, chase her out!" Penny barked loudly, ready to follow orders. Harley arrived on the scene, her expression firm as she recalled how this puppy had made her live in fear for years. But things were different now, and she wasn't going to let Eric have his way anymore. With a grin, Harley tossed something for Penny to fetch. The dog eagerly ran off to retrieve it, barking excitedly. Eric, visibly displeased, called out in frustration, "Penny, where are you going?" Harley tried to scold Eric, pointing out that he always ordered Penny to do bad things and questioned if he even felt sorry for her. Ignoring her, Eric continued to call for Penny, who obediently returned to his side. He scolded the dog, warning her that if she fetched anything without his command again, she would be punished. Penny's spirits drooped, saddened by the reprimand. Seeing Penny's sad expression, Harley couldn't stand by. She tried to lift Penny's mood by praising her and offering her a snack, which immediately made Penny wag her tail in happiness. However, Erich was not pleased with Harley's actions and snapped at her, questioning what she had done to his dog. Harley, unfazed, simply replied that she had given Penny a snack. Erich, still annoyed, shot back that she didn't deserve to give Penny anything. Harley could only sigh inwardly at his stubbornness, thinking to herself, "Gosh, this kid." Harley ignored Eric and began playing with Penny, commanding the dog to perform tricks like giving her paw, sitting, and even pretending to sleep. Penny obediently complied, which only frustrated Eric further, unable to believe how easily Harley controlled the dog. Internally, Harley grinned, knowing she had spent more time studying and training Penny than Eric ever had. She remembered all the trouble she had gone through to teach the puppy these commands. Just then, Cavell arrived on the scene, calling out to Eric and Harley, referring to Harley as trash once again. Harley couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation at the nickname. Erich, still frustrated, suggested that Cavell play with Harley since she seemed bored. Cavell's eyes lit up at the idea, happy to have something to do indoors. He immediately proposed practicing sword, fighting together, which enraged Harley. Without waiting for her response, Cavell began dragging her along, declaring that she would be his training partner from now on. Meanwhile, Erich snickered at the situation. Harley, determined to avoid being dragged into sword fighting practice, quickly stopped Cavell by asking him how old she was. Cavell, a bit confused, responded that she was 7. Seizing the opportunity, Harley began to manipulate him, pointing out that she was younger, smaller, and weaker than him, making it obvious that she would keep getting defeated in any practice. She cleverly added that someone as honorable as Cavell wouldn't enjoy bullying someone weaker than himself, unlike a shameless and petty person might. She suggested that what Cavell actually meant was that he wanted to train with Erich, praising him with a cute, teary face to make her argument more persuasive. Cavell, flustered, fell into Harley's trap, agreeing that she was right and that he should train with Eric instead. Eric, shocked by the sudden turn of events, couldn't believe what he was hearing. But Cavell, now convinced, declared that he wouldn't fight weak kids and urged Eric to join him in training. Eric, still trying to process what had just happened, was left bewildered. As Cavell led Eric away, Harley smirked to herself, satisfied that everything had gone according to her plan. Eugene arrived and questioned Harley about her recent changes since her last fainting episode. Harley, feeling nervous, wondered aloud about Eugene's habit of sneaking up on people. Eugene, in response, asked why it was an issue. Harley thought to herself that Eugene was more complex, compared to Cavell or Eric, and she was unsure about Eugene's intentions. Eugene countered by accusing her of deception, suggesting that she had been pretending to be good all along. Harley was bewildered by this conclusion and insisted that Eugene didn't know anything about her. Eugene warned that if Harley had been deceiving his mother with ulterior motives, he would never forgive her, expressing regret that she was allowed into their home. Later, Harley, feeling unwell in bed, was attended to by the Duchess. The doctor explained that Harley's body had been significantly weakened by her recent illness. The Duchess, concerned, asked if there could be another cause, to which the doctor confirmed that while Harley was already in poor health, the sudden environmental changes might have exacerbated her condition. The doctor advised rest and medication. As Harley lay frail and sobbing, she reflected on her unhappiness, questioning whether it was possible to be unhappy even in a dream. She wondered if this situation could be real, though she dismissed the idea as a horrifying thought. The Duchess expressed concern over Harley's persistent fever and suggested she rest. Harley reassured her aunt that she was fine and urged her to get some rest as well. The Duchess offered to stay by Harley's side until she fell asleep, expressing her worry about leaving her alone. Duke wished Harley a restful recovery and assured her of his presence. Cavell questioned if Harley was truly sick, to which Duke confirmed she needed rest and suggested they leave quietly. The Duchess asked Harley if she felt cold or nauseous, to which Harley responded negatively. The Duchess then comforted Harley, encouraging her to be open about her discomfort, and reassured her that both she and her uncle would always be there for her. Harley was touched by this protective care. The Duchess lovingly instructed Harley to rest well, promising that everything would be fine upon waking. During a meal at the dining table, Duke reminded Harley to eat well. Harley offered some of her food to Duke on the condition that he call her uncle. Nervously, she obliged, thinking to herself that Duke was easily tricked and unaware that her offer was partly to avoid eating broccoli, which she disliked. Harley smirked at how easily she had manipulated the situation. Eugene intervened to disrupt Harley's plan, telling her that she shouldn't be picky with her food. He then warned his father that only allowing Harley to eat what she wanted wasn't good for her health, and that she needed a balanced diet. Duke agreed with Eugene's point and instructed Harley to open her mouth for a bite. Harley, feeling frustrated, realized Eugene had deliberately thwarted her plan and reacted with a forced smile while eating the broccoli. Eugene praised her for eating well. Cavell, eager to join in, announced that he also ate well, and Duke agreed, calling Cavell a good boy too. Harley, feeling determined, resolved to make Cavell her next target. Later, Harley lay in bed in her room, feeling disheartened, and noting difficulty in pronouncing some letters, possibly due to her age. A knock on the door signaled the Duchess, who entered to remind Harley that it was time to take her medicine. Harley, shocked and unhappy about the medicine, took it reluctantly, feeling disheartened. The Duchess praised Harley for taking her medicine well and expressed her approval, calling Harley a good girl. With emotions in her eyes, she gave Harley a candy she had bought on her way home, promising to give her one each time she took her medicine. Harley, puzzled by the candy, watched as the Duchess left before she could express her thanks. Feeling pleasantly surprised, Harley reflected on how long it had been since she had been treated like a child, and felt that it would be a shame to simply eat the candy. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, and upon responding, she found Eugene there. Harley, disappointed by his presence, asked why he was there. Eugene, unenthusiastic, mentioned that he would leave in 30 minutes and questioned if his mother had instructed him to stay. He suggested that Harley could tell her he was sleeping, but Eugene coldly noted that she had just left the room and implied that his suggestion wouldn't be believable. Harley realized Eugene had a point. Eugene sat calmly, and Harley noticed that he seemed disinterested in speaking with her, which she found convenient. She began to unwrap the candy, which made Eugene flinch upon noticing it. Clearly displeased, Eugene questioned why Harley had the candy. Harley, somewhat perturbed, pointed out that the candy was given to her by the Duchess just moments ago. Eugene, with a stern demeanor, insisted that she give it to him, revealing that it was Alina's favorite candy. This annoyed Harley, who felt that Eugene was trying to dictate what she could or could not have simply because it was associated with Alina. Despite Eugene's insistence, Harley firmly refused, clenching the candy tightly and questioning why she should have to give it up just because it was connected to Alina. Eugene demanded that Harley hand over the candy, insisting that she didn't deserve to eat it and that she should give it to him immediately. Harley firmly refused, declaring that it was hers. Eugene, growing increasingly frustrated, tried to snatch the candy from her, but Harley managed to dodge his attempts. He continued to insist that she give it to him, arguing that she shouldn't have it. Harley responded by pointing out that the Duchess had given her the candy, questioning why Eugene thought he had any right to take it. She reflected on how Eugene's reasoning, based on the candy being Alina's favorite, seemed unreasonable. As Eugene made another attempt to grab the candy, Harley dodged again, teasing him about his speed and mocking him as a slowpoke. Eugene, infuriated by her provocation, became visibly angry. Frustrated, Eugene caught Harley and climbed on top of her, boasting about catching her and calling her a slowpoke. However, both of them quickly became embarrassed and shy at the awkward situation. Duke then entered the room, having heard the commotion, and observed that it didn't seem like they were playing. He questioned them, noting that something seemed off. Eugene climbed down and stood up as Duke inquired about the loud noise. Harley complained to Duke, saying Eugene had taken the candy the Duchess gave her. Duke was surprised and asked Eugene why he took it, demanding it be returned. Eugene, remaining silent finally, admitted he had already eaten it. Duke, frustrated, slapped Eugene and reprimanded him for acting childishly, attributing it to his brother's influence. He instructed Eugene to apologize to Harley, which he did. Duke then assured Harley that he would buy her more candy the next day in various colors and sizes, and suggested she get some rest. He took Eugene out of the room, leaving Harley to reflect on the situation. She was shocked by Duke's reaction and the slap he gave Eugene, feeling an unexpected pang of guilt.